Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Namaskar. Welcome to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. I am Dr. Priti Basir. Welcome you in the lecture series of Internet and Web Designing. We will be going to start Unit 3 of Block 1. It is all about web server and which kind of protocols are being used for the successful communication over the Internet. The agenda of today's lecture is the introduction to web server and its types. That means what is all about the web server and which kind of web servers are presently available with us. We will also discuss the domain name server DNS, right? Basically how these domain name servers plays its role for naming convention for each and every devices over the Internet. Then we will be discussing about the web protocol like HTTP. We will be also discussing about the FTP protocol, SMTP protocol, and TCP/IP protocol will be also discussed. Then in the next topic we will be discussing about the what is mail client and the news group. Now let us start with the what is web server. As we know that all the communication is taken place over the Internet. Basically it follows the client server model. In this client server model there are two components are being used for the communication. The first one that is called as a client and the second one is called as a server, right? So whenever the request is placed over the Internet, this request is to be sent by the client, and basically this client is nothing but the browser, right? And we need to specify the URL of this whatever the page we would like to access, which has been sent by the client, and this request is to be sent to the web server, right? And the web server will process this request, and if that content is available on the web server, that the response will be sent back to the client by the web server, right? It sends the files to the client associated with the requested URL. This is the main function of the web server, right? And it provides again if the resource is not has been there in the form of web pages, it automatically generates the request. It automatically generates the response pages, and this response pages is to be given back to the client, right? So basically to generate the dynamic response, there are various technology have been used. We can call it as a PHP, ASP.NET and Java Servlet and many more other technology through which the web server dynamically generates the response, and this it generates the web pages, and these web pages will be sent to the client. In this figure you can see that there are various type of requests are coming from the different web browser, right? So the web browser may be the request can be coming from the mobile user, it can be coming from the desktop user, or it can be coming from any other notepad or smartphone devices, right? So once the request will be sent from the different client, right, this will be sent to the server, right, and server will process that request, okay, and if there is a necessary information is required from the database, it will send that request to the database server, and after fetching that information from the database server, the response is generated by the web server and it will be given to the respective client, right, and with the use of HTTP, right. So basically the web server is nothing but the system, right, and it is the combination of the hardware and the software, right, and it provides the web pages to the end user, right, with the help of protocols. So many protocols are being used like HTTP, TCP/IP, FTP, SMTP, POP3 and many more protocol, right, which are interacted, which have been running together, and finally it makes the communication more successful. Now there are some functions of the web server. We have seen the definition of the web server. It is nothing but the combination of the hardware and software, right, and that web server provides the generates the response in the form of web pages and send back to the user with the help of the different protocol, right, and this system is called as a web server. Generally it is the high configuration computer. Now there are some functions of the web server. What are these? It stores the web pages and provide the primary level of the security of the websites, right. A web server stores the different websites of the different organizations, right, and again all these websites should be secured, okay, and it should be stored at some centralized location, that is called as a web server, right. So the storing and securing all these website pages will be done at the web server side. So for that we do require the some softwares, right, so that we can be able to maintain the security of the website over the web server. It also helps to access the website databases, right. So sometime it may happen that dynamic content should be generated, right. So web server provides the capability of generating the dynamic content, and this dynamic content will be sent to the client. It provides the proper response to the end user as per their request, right. It gives the response, right. If the client send the particular URL for particular web pages, right, it generates the response, and if this response requires some images, audios or videos, it makes use of all this content and it generates the response and send back to the client, right. The bandwidth controlling on the network traffic. It also control the bandwidth, so that if there is a more request is coming from the different client, it can be able to handle that request. It serves as a virtual web service if there is a required. So sometime the cloud based services are to be required by the different client. Again it also provide that kind of services to the end user, right. It also supports the server side scripting. Okay, we know only the client side. For the client side scripting we have a JavaScript, we have a HTML and CSS, but for generating the dynamic response we require the server side scripting, right. So this web server also has the capability of generating the server side dynamic response by using the server side scripting, right. So these are the functions of the web server. Now there are different kinds of web servers available with us. The first one, that is called as a Apache HTTP web server, and the second one is the IIS web server. Now let us discuss each and every one in detail. The first one we call it as a Apache web server. Basically this is developed by the Apache Software Foundation, right, and this Apache web server is a open source, and this supports many platforms, such as it supports Windows, it can run on Linux also, it can run on any of the operating system which are available at present, right. So it is open source software. That means if you would like to want to have a Apache web server in our PC, you can freely download this Apache server and you can use its services, right. And nowadays approximately more than 70% machines are running on Apache server, right, across the world, right. So many companies are using the Apache server because it is a open source, and we don't need to pay money to purchase this Apache web server, right. Apart from this, we can also customize the server as per our requirement, because it is open source. Anybody can modify its functionality. One can remove that functionality if it is not required. One can add some more functionality into this web server, right. So enterprises, those who are willing to run the web server for the free of cost, right, they can download Apache web server from the Apache Software Foundation website, and they can modify the functions, right. They can also add some more function as per their requirement, right. So, and it is more stable than any other web server, right. So, and easier to solve the organizational issues, because it is open source, and if the organization want to modify or resolve some issues, right, if they have encountered, it is easy to do, right. Next one, that is the IIS web server. Basically, this IIS web server is to be run only on the Windows NT or 2000 and 2003 platform, right. So, this IIS web server cannot run on any of the operating system. It is built by the Microsoft, right, and this IIS server is tightly integrated with the Windows operating system. Okay. So, we cannot remove, we cannot add some more functionality into the IIS web server, right. It is high performance based web server from the Microsoft. Okay. So, as compared to this Apache web server, it is high performance based because it requires the services of the Windows platform, right. And this IIS web server is tightly integrated with the Windows, right. So, it is relatively easy to administer it, right. So, if there is any query encounter over this IIS server, one can also easily resolve it, right. Now, let us see the comparison of the Apache and the IIS web server, right. You can see the Apache column, and the next one column, it is MS Microsoft Office IIS server. Now, the comparison of these two web server has been mentioned here according to their some particular criteria, right. So, we can see that the Apache server is to be developed by the Apache Software Foundation, and IIS to be developed by the Microsoft. Then yes, license. What about the license of the Apache? It is open source, right, and it can be freely downloaded from the internet. But in case of IIS, it is licensed under the Microsoft, right. If you have a license CD, you can have this IIS server inbuilt with the Windows operating system, right. Now, if you look at the operating system, the Apache server can run on any of the operating system, right. It is platform independent, right, and IIS can only work on the Windows operating system, because it is the product of the Microsoft, and this IIS server can only run on the Microsoft Windows operating system. Popularity wise, if you look at the Apache server, it is more popular because it is free, right, and a small organization cannot afford this IIS server. In that case, they can use the open source, right. So, more than 70% developer are using the Apache server, while if we look at the popularity of the IIS server, it is less because it is inbuilt with the Windows operating system, right. Then portability. Portability, yes, it can portable in the terms of operating system, as well as it can work on any of the hardware, right. We cannot say that this Apache cannot run on IBM machine. It can run on any Intel or IBM machine also, right? Then yes, if you look at the portability of this IIS server, comparatively less portable. It can run on the Windows of any Windows 2000, Windows 2003, Windows XP, right? But it is less portable as compared to the Apache. Then modularity. Apache server, the developer or administrator can add their own module. Yes, as we know that Apache server is a open source. Okay, so we can add some module, we can remove the existing, we can do modifications in the functionality of the Apache server, but we can't do the functionality, we can't make the changes, the functionality of the IIS server as we can do with the Apache server, right? Execution speed. If you look at the execution speed of the Apache server, it runs in the user space only. So it is quite faster than the Microsoft IIS server, right? While in case of IIS server, user space is required, as well as it also run on the kernel also, right? Operating system's kernel is there, so it runs over the kernel, as well as it also makes use of user spaces to execute. Then it works as a web server, while it works as a web server as well as the application server, right? In case of yes, the Apache server can work as a backend, okay, while in case of this IIS, it can run as a web server or it can also run as a application server. Now, so in the previous lecture we have seen about the what is web server and the different types of web server, that is IIS server and Apache server. Now let us see domain name server. Basically, the domain name server is a one kind of server, right, which maps the website with its corresponding IP address, because it is very difficult for us to remember the IP address of each and every websites, right? So the mapping of each and every websites and its corresponding IP address is to be done at by the domain name server, right? So when the client PC requests for any website, he don't have to specify the IP address, right? So he has to specify the domain name for which the web page should be requested, right? The domain name, for example, www.google.com. This domain name should be specified, right? And the request will be sent to the server. But before that, the domain name, before sending the request to the web server, there is an intermediator called as a domain name server, which which maps the domain name into its corresponding IP addresses, right? So for example, if you specify www.bau.edu.in, right? So domain name server will map this domain name into its corresponding IP addresses, right? And the request will be sent to the web server specifying the IP address, right? So finally it will do, the web server will look after the request from where the request is coming, right? From which IP address the request is coming, so that it can be able to send the response to the specific IP address only, right? Now the advantages of domain name server: it is exclusive. Generally, DNS is the exclusive system within the entire world, which will assist you to browse the web. Okay, so there is you don't need to mention the IP address of each and every website. You should have to specify the domain name of the particular website for the accessing that website, right? No need to memorizing the IP address, because at present we have so many millions of the websites are there, and its corresponding domain names are also available. Okay, these domain names are in meaningful form, right? We don't need to memorize the IP address of each and every web pages, right? So the domain name server makes the mapping of the domain name of the website with the its corresponding IP address, right? So we don't need to memorize the IP addresses to uh, the domain name, right? So the domain name server offers the PG, the resolution of the changing domain and subdomain names to the IP address, right? So if the domain names are changing its corresponding IP address, we don't need to remember all these IP address, because millions of the websites are there, millions of web pages are there, and we don't need to remember all these IP addresses of each and every web pages and websites, right? So DNS itself is doing the mapping of the website and its corresponding website name and its corresponding IP addresses. It also been used for the saving and security threatening, right? So DNS servers are very important part of the safety for your home and work connections. It is fast. It provides the fast internet access. The people and organization that use the DNS server can be able to take the advantages of the high connection speed that are key feature in some of the servers, right? Now let us look at the disadvantages of DNS. The first disadvantage, it is dependency. In dependency, basically it is controlled by the non-profit organization called Internet Society ISOC, and this society, its roots are tied in the other country, right? So it is very difficult to control the uh, the difficulty have been occurred in DNS. The second one disadvantage is that no personal identity for the data analysis. DNS queries usually don't carry the information about the client who initiated it. This is one of the reason why DNS has been popular among the hackers. This is because the server side will only see the IP address from where the query come from, and which can at time can be manipulated by the hackers. Basically, these DNS are one of the most popular targeting by the hackers, right? Because the server side, it only looks at the IP address and from where the query have been introduced, right? From where the request is coming, right? And it can make changes into that IP addresses and can be able to hack that server. Apart from this, DNS servers are based on the principle of the slave master relationship, master slave, right? So if there is any problem encountered in the masters, right, so the entire communication will be disturbed, right? So DNS server is based on the this master slave relationship. Now let us look at the web protocol. Which kinds of protocols are being used in the internet communication? Basically, we are aware about the OSI protocol, OSI architecture, right? In OSI architecture, it has 7 layers, right? So it makes use of these 7 layers to successful communication over the internet. Now these 7 layers are physical layer, data link layer, networking layer, transport layer, session layer, presentation layer, and application layer. Apart from this, it also use the TCP/IP protocol layers, right? In this TCP/IP layer, it makes use of 4 layers. The first one is the data link and physical layer. The second layer is networking layer. Third one is the transport layer, and the fourth one is the application layer. Each and every layer are being used by the different protocols. So if you look at the application layer, SMTP protocol, FTP, HTTP, POP3, IMAP, SNTP protocol are being used, right, at the application. That is a client. Basically, the clients, when they are sending the request for any web page, they are working on this application layer, and they are using the SMTP. These different protocols have been specified by the application. For sending the request, right, it also makes use of TCP/IP protocol at the transport layer. For traversing the packet over the internet, it makes use of the IP protocol, internet protocol, right. So we will see all these protocol in detail, right. So the first one, that is called as a HTTP protocol. The full form of HTTP protocol is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and it works at the application layer, and this is basically used on the World Wide Web, right. Right now we are currently using HTTP protocol for the communication, right. We know that this HTTP protocol, the client send the request with the use of HTTP protocol, right, to the server, and same way the server also use the HTTP protocol to send the response to the client, right. Okay, so this is the fundamental of the communication over the internet, HTTP protocol. Without HTTP protocol, no one can be able to communicate with each other, right. Now what are the features of the HTTP protocol? We have seen here the connectionless. One of the important feature of the HTTP protocol is connectionless. Second one is the media independent, and the third one is the stateless protocol. Now let us see connectionless protocol. So when the client send the request to the server, it makes use of the HTTP protocol, right. So the for sending the request, the connection is established with the server, right. Once the request is sent to the server, server will look after which kind of pages have been requested by the client. It will find from its database, and the response will be generated and sent back to the client using HTTP protocol. Once the communication is over, the connection will be terminated. That means the all over the communication between these two, client and server, will be terminated. So this is called as a connectionless. So whenever again if the client want to send the request, every time the connection should be established, right. So that's why every time the connection will be stopped, it will be disconnected, right, once the communication is done. Then the second one is the media independent. In case of media independent, any client can access the information from the internet of any type, right. It can be text, it can be visual, it can be audio, or it can be image. That means it is we cannot say that we can access only textual information, right. Any kind of information can be accessible using HTTP protocol. The next one feature of the HTTP, that is stateless protocol. It is connectionless as well as the stateless, right. So, whenever the communication is done with the client and server, right, it is remains in the current state. Once the connection is destroyed, they will forget about each other, right. So, that's why it is called as a stateless protocol. Now, let us see the basic characteristic of the HTTP. What are the characteristics of the HTTP? The browser and server can exchange on the web. Both can communicate with each other, right. They can share, they can exchange the idea, they can exchange the information. With this protocol, basically works on the principle of the request and response, right. This HTTP protocol works on the request and response protocol. So, every time when the when person want to communicate, right, every time the new connection is established, right. So, these are the features of HTTP. So, in today's lecture we have seen the what is web server, different types of web server and the comparison of IIS web server, Microsoft web server and Apache web server. Apart from this, we also seen this HTTP protocol for the successful communication. I hope you must have understood this session. See you in the next time. Thank you.